Also been a major part of the TR register, and in 1984 some 21 TRs lined up on the grid at Alton Park for the very first round of the TR Register Race Championship. There were lots of TRs racing in the early 80s in various championships and formulas, all trying to emulate the success of the great Reg Woodcock, who regularly beat Astons and Porsches with his trusty TR. The years up to when the racing championship ceased in 2006 saw many epic battles. Steve Hall versus Pete Cox in 1986 in their TR4s. Reg Woodcock himself entered and won in 1985, and other champions included Mick Richards, Chris Connolly, Richard Wright, Colin Pendle, Joe Henderson, Rob Cowing, Bert Smeets, Graham Miller and John Wolfe, with Mike Hughes being the only driver to race every season. In 1983, the Southern Sprint and Hill Climb Championship, which had been running since 1976, was adopted as the TR Register Sprint and Hill Climb Championship. And the first name on the trophy that year was the man who still supports it now. We heard from him earlier as part of the trade. That's Neil Revington, and that, under Roger's careful guidance, goes from strength to strength. So for our motorsport panel, please welcome to the stage Daryl U. Pritchard, Mike Hughes, Roger McEwen, and Paul Hogan. Take a seat, make yourselves at home. So we'll start at the very beginning, Daryl, and the start of the race championship. We told some of the story last night, of course, but different crowd today, and a lot of people won't know where it all began, and you can tell us exactly that story, can't you?
No. I've got some corrections to make, because of course, when you make a little bit of an announcement in public, people all rush up to you and say, oh, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, and
yes,
that wasn't me. But I'll start with that correction, and that was that when we ran the race championship for the first season, we didn't have enough TRs to support a grid. And at the time, I was racing a TR3 in the Aston Martin Owners Club Thoroughbred Sports Championship, and was racing against people like Mike Salmon, Reg Woodcock, mainly Astons, no other TRs, I don't think, except mine and Reg's. Reg always won, or mainly won. He was very successful. And I said that the first championship was won by one of the Healys, because we invited the Healys along to make up the grid, and that it was Dennis Welsh who won. The reality was that Dennis Welsh wasn't part of the Register Championship, because that was for TRs. It was Steve Hall who won the championship. Dennis actually had more points than anyone else, and we had to, in the end, buy him a special cup, which cost us a lot of money, because he had more points than he had a Healy, and we felt it was rather rude to invite all the Healys and then win nothing. So that's why Dennis was raised last night. I started by saying that when we all got together, as I'm sure you know the feeling, we weren't racing cars, we were polishing them, and it was always social. And that was the main focus of where the TR group started from, and for the first 3 or 4 months. And of course, then you get itchy feet and you perhaps want to do a bit of motorsport in a mild sense. So there were things like auto tests, and I ran the one at Brentford Market, and there was auto tests that I also ran in the Trent group. The Trent group were a much more aggressive group in terms of motorsport than the Thames Valley group. And we had a number of autosport and auto tests in the Derbyshire area. And also we were invited as a club onto local rallies, the Shenstone and District Rally, the Vagabond Rally. Quite a few members here and now still remember that, an all-night rally, which was good fun. So everyone started to be talking about motorsport. And I thought that I wanted to stop polishing my car. It wasn't a very nice one anyway, and I'd rather make it go faster. And at the time, I'd been going to Goodwood, because I lived near Goodwood, and attending the Alfa Romeo's Club sprint meetings there. And of course, in those days, Goodwood could only be used about once every 2 months because of noise regulations, and the local community were hostile to motorsport, and it was almost at closure state. So we had motorsport there, and I attended these sprints and saw how it was done, and thought, well, we've got enough guys who would be interested. Let's do our own. Let's have some TRs. So I embarked on doing a sprint at Goodwood, and I obviously had to adhere to RAC regulations because we were controlled by as an RAC club, and they controlled all the motorsport in the UK. But I wanted to do it my way, which wasn't quite in line with the RAC's way. And that was because a sprint means that you can only launch one car at a time, and it's usually the slowest car with all the faster cars gradually coming on behind at 10-second intervals, so no one theoretically can overtake the car in front of them because they will have done a lap or 2 laps before the other car can catch them. And therefore, there was no racing, no danger, and the minimal amount of accidents, which I thought was fairly tedious. So I decided that we would have an event where we'd start all 3 cars from the front of the grid together so that we could have a race. After all, we wanted to race the cars, not have a convoy. And I wrote to the RAC saying that the TR Register would like to do this. And the RAC wrote back and said, Mr. Needham, Mr. Les Needham, who's etched in my brain, he said, on no circumstances can we do this. And I pleaded and wrote, and it went on for about, at least a week. And I thought, I'm going to dump the RAC and run this on my own, which is what I did. But unfortunately, the RAC sent an observer. And the observer wrote to the TR Register after the illegal event and demanded that the secretary of the register, which was then Alan Robinson, and the guy who ran the event, they were to appear in person in Belgrave Square at the headquarters of the RAC club for a court which was going to try the club on the basis of running an illegal motorsport event. And we were a bit shocked, really. Alan said I didn't do anything, which was true, but he was the secretary. Anyway, we went up to the Belgrave, the house in Belgrave Square, a very posh courtroom, you know, oak-lined, very Victorian, dark, lots of people, you couldn't see their faces. But Les Needham was there, and he was reading out the Riot Act to Alan and myself. And during the proceedings, at the end of the room was the judge, and it was very, very formal. And Les Needham said it's normal in the procedures for us to record things, a bit like everything today, where we're recording this telephone conversation for training purposes. Well, it was something along those lines. And did I have any objections, or did we have any objections? And I said, I do. I object to being recorded. And the dark judge in the far corner, who I couldn't really see, said, overruled. So that will tell you what the outcome was. The club was fined, and we had a letter, I think, probably on file today, that said, if you run an event like that again, you'll never run any event again because you will be excommunicated from the RAC. So after that, we did run another Goodwood, a legal Goodwood, and a legal Goodwood, not an illegal Goodwood. And from then, we started to, we all had the bug for going racing. Of course, no one had a race license then, so it took some time for various members and the enthusiasm to percolate through the groups, through to other people, mainly because of the 2 Goodwood events and the auto test that we ran. And eventually, we decided that we had the strength to run a championship, but as I said in the introduction, we didn't really have enough for a full grid. We invited the Austin Healey's along only because I was racing against them in another championship. And I think we had 5 or 6 or 7 Austin Healey's, and that made up a full grid. And we ran our first championship year, which then went on. Mike Hughes took over, went on for many years. And I think it was a very successful time in the register's history.
Well, brilliant. From those perhaps shaky beginnings, I think it's fair to say, which is a good reminder as to why we should always do things properly, I suppose, with modern regulations and stuff, to Mike Hughes, who oversaw the championship right until 2006 when suddenly it ceased. But looking back on those years, Mike, there were some epic battles up and down the grid, wasn't there? Tell us your memories.
Yes, it was very much so. As I said last night, we, after sort of fairly modest beginnings when we had to invite the Healeys for the season, we quickly became very, very popular, and we were facing oversubscribed grids. In fact, for probably about 5 or 6 years, we often had to have 2 races to accommodate the TRs Racing Championship, especially if it was a very popular circuit like Donington Park, shall we say. So that continued, and I think by the 1990s we had over 80 registrations for about 3 years running. Now that's any one-make championship nowadays that can attract that, especially with historic cars, is doing something right. So it was very, very popular. That unfortunately did wane towards the end. We had to invite the TSSC cars to join us at one point because our numbers were dwindling. That gave us a sort of a boost for a few years, but they sort of started to drift away, as well as other championships which they could enter came about, which is one of the reasons why the TR grids eventually started to dwindle, and why, unfortunately, the championship did finish in 2006, 2007. I can remember from I was talking last night, that my 2 probably most memorable organisations or events that we went to were in 98 to 2000, when the TR Register Holland invited us to take the championship over to Zandvoort to race in the circuit there. Not initially on the Grand Prix circuit, which they now do race on, and which the Grand Prix, I believe, is coming back there for 2020, but initially on a shorter circuit. But one particular, I think it was 2000, we were on the full circuit by then, and by that time in the championship, the V8 cars had become quite prevalent at the front end of the grid. Initially, all the races were run by the early cars, 1 or 2, obviously Reg Woodcock only did 1 year, but 1 or 2 other quick cars. TR4s then became fairly dominant, and then the six-cylinder cars got into their stride, and they had a period when they were virtually unbeatable. The V8s, there were still V8s about, but nobody had really come out with one that was going to beat everybody else. But by the year 2000, late 90s, there was a couple of really quick V8s out, and certainly at the power circuits, the 6-cylinder and certainly the 4-cylinder cars were struggling to keep up. Anyway, the third time we went to Zandvoort, we didn't realise at first, it was called the British Race Festival. I think it may still run actually now, but we were invited for 3 years running. We had our own race. We were also invited to join in with the German and Dutch TRs in their race. They didn't like us going over because we always beat them, but that's another story. But on this particular occasion, what we hadn't realised was that Jan Lammers, the Grand Prix driver, was doing a demonstration, several demonstration runs during the weekend in one of the Group C Jaguar cars. And we'd occasionally had problems with noise, usually at Castle Combe. Castle Combe was a circuit in the UK where noise was always a problem. Very nice area. The houses are quite close to the circuit as well. I can remember a race there once when Pete Cox, I think, had qualified on the front row of the grid, was pulled up for noise, and the answer was they had a little supplier there that would supply you with these little cherry bomb silencers that you could attach to your car, which would reduce the noise.
Beginnings
down.
of Merlin Motorsport, I think that's where
that's
it began.
Right. That's exactly it. Merlin Motorsport is still there now with the shop, I believe. And Pete strapped this, I think he was the only one that was actually caught out on the day, and he strapped it onto the back of his car, and I think he finished about 17th. In fact, he was dicing with a guy called Eddie Driver in a little Road Sports TR2, much to his dismay, and that's the effect it had on his car. But the difference with Castle Combe was that they would pull you up in practice, and then you had to put the silencer on, re-scrutineered, and if you passed, then you were allowed to race. And they had a drive-through system there where they measured the noise as the car drove past. Most circuits use noise restrictions by testing the car when you scrutineer, or just before you go out for practice. So at least you got time to rectify it. What they hadn't told us at Zandvoort was that they had a slightly different rule there. They would probably warn you in the race and expect that you'll do something about it, but then it was up to you. What they didn't tell us was that if you were then in the race and you still were shown to be exceeding the noise limit, you were black flagged. Now, unfortunately, on this day, a TR5 driven by a very quick driver called Richard Bull had managed to get the better of the V8s and pulled out a slight gap. And I don't know if many of you have been to Zandvoort, but there's a huge long straight at Zandvoort, pit straight, followed by a very wide hairpin, which is banked. So the V8s would really pull away normally there, but Richard managed to pull out a gap on the two quick ones and was comfortably leaving the race when all of a sudden the black flag came out just for the leader. So he had to acknowledge it, pulled in, and that was it. Very disappointing. We afterwards found out that the circuit has a noise allocation for the meeting, and Jan Lammers in the XJ, or whatever it was, had taken about 40% of the allocation for the whole weekend, and that had resulted in us, in Richard unfortunately being disqualified. Very sad. The other meeting that springs to mind was when we took 8 cars over and 11 drivers to Mid-Ohio in 2002 to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the TR2. The Americans put a race on every 10 years to celebrate the anniversary, but it was the 50th, and they said, would we like to bring some British cars over? So we did. Cut a long story short, we took 8 over in a transporter, specially rigged up, went over by ferry over from Liverpool to Newark. All the cars were fitted in. All the drivers, bar a couple, flew over. And I say the race was at Mid-Ohio. We flew into Cleveland, then we got motorhomes, went down to the circuit. The cars had a problem. The trailer had a problem rather and didn't turn up. But what I was going to tell you a little slightly funny story. Some of you may know there's always a drivers' meeting between practice and the race where the clerk of the course will mention any incidents that there's been during the practice. He won't name individuals because they'll already have been spoken to and if they've been black flagged or whatever and told, not to do it again. But it's a general talk just to welcome a few people because the American meetings are spread over a much longer period than our meetings are here. Anyway, on this particular occasion, as I said, we'd all gone over to Mid-Ohio. And Cass Kastner was there, Mike Cook was there, who was Mr. Standard Triumph in North America. Unfortunately passed away, I think, last year. But the clerk of the course was apparently a ex-Corvette driver. So no particular affinity to TRs. But he started his sort of little speech, which he gives to everybody, all the drivers, and said, I'd first like to mention and welcome a number of drivers that have come all the way over from the UK to take part in the special Triumph race, because our race was the feature race of the event. We were on the posters and everything. It was very, very good. 48 entries we had for the race itself. And he said, does anybody know the difference between a TR4 and a TR6? So that's right, sorry, he asked us all to stand up, so we all stood up. Does anybody know the difference between a TR4 and a TR6? So, well, the TR6 is a TR4 with 2 more mistakes. I think that's probably not unique, but it's the first time I'd heard it anyway. So, anyway, after that was sort of, the little ripple of laughter went round. But in the race, I mean, we, first of all, of the Americans, in the race itself, we finished 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 6th, 8th, 11th, I think, one retirement out of 48 cars. So, despite all the hospitality they'd given us, we were going to race them. But in other races, one of the V8s beat several of the Corvettes, Cobras, and that. So, I think we got our own back a little bit there.
Brilliant. Well, from humble beginnings that Darryl described there, right up to going across to America, taking the championship cars over there. Fantastic stories and memories that you all must have from competing in that race championship. Have you got any more competitors from the race championship throughout the years? Just wave your hands. We had a few in the room last night. Yeah, there's a couple. Yeah, there. His car's in one piece again now, which is excellent. That's great. Thank you for that, Mike, and thank you for all that you did for the race championship across all those years. And we'll talk now to Roger, because you too have overseen some real heydays, really, and the golden era, I think, for hill climb and sprinting in the TR register has probably been the last few years.
That's right, yeah. It's grown and grown since I took over. I started hill climbing in 1999 in my beautiful Mimosa TR6, which I still use to this day. I took over organising the championship in 2002 from a person who ran his own business and had a full secretariat organisation. I didn't realise this when I took it over. 25 events, at that time 20 members. That meant 500 copies of event regulations, each one with 5 pages. How on earth do I produce these? Fortunately, I managed to con my company to allow me to use the office printer. I don't think they realised what I was printing. But then it all had to go in envelopes, postage stamps, address labels. A major job. The internet has made life so easy that nowadays I don't copy anything and I don't post anything, it all goes out. So in the days when I took over, we had 20, if we were lucky, 25 members that registered for the championship. We now have 40 this year, and we're all set up for next year. And it's interesting to hear the discussion of the early days of the race championship and what goes on, because would I love to be able to book Goodwood for a weekend to organise an event? It's just not on anymore, and the whole thing has just become far too commercial for a club like ours to actually organise events. But it is very interesting to note that we are considered to be the second most important car club to invite to events after Ferrari. And that's really great, because it means, I mean, our calendar this year is 25 events across the country, a mixture of sprints and hill climbs. It could easily be 50. I get so many invitations to take the championship to new venues and new events.
And having seen the Hill Climb and Sprint Championship in action, and I remember well sitting on the hill at Harewood House watching you guys racing, even when I was back at university going up and watching you race. It is exciting, even though there's not cars passing each other on track, it's still exciting to watch those times come up and see the times coming down throughout the day. So I can well understand why you are such a popular championship to have along to events. And of course, really, if you've never been to see the Hill Climb and Sprint Championship, you really must. All the fixtures are always published in the back of TR Action magazine. They're on the website. Even the regulations are up there for you to read. Do go along and support these guys. It is a fantastic day out, and go and watch these cars. And it's not just TRs, because as you say, you bolt onto other events, don't you?
That's right. I mean, at the event, there will be classes, general classes for modified cars and standard cars, Euro boxes, but there'll also be 3 or 4 one-make car clubs invited as well. So there's and of course racing cars, including, you know, full-blown ex-Formula 1 cars. So there's plenty to watch and see. Our championship as a point is now open to any four-wheel Triumph, not just TRs. this was introduced a number of years ago to keep the championship going and to keep the numbers coming in, and has been very successful at doing that. So it's the beauty of sprinting and hill climbing, and why we don't have overtaking, etc., is it makes it cheaper. We haven't got big insurance, you haven't got to spend a load of money on tyres, you don't have crashes. It's very unusual to see a spill in a sprint and a hill climb. Someone may run off onto the grass, but you know, you don't see the sorts of crashes that one sees at race meetings. And that keeps the cost down.
Well, Roger, well done to you, because, as I say, the heyday for the TR Register Sprint and Hill Climb Championship is now. You're in it. This is a golden era for that championship. And the last few years in particular have seen the largest grids that you've ever had, largest entries. And I think that's probably because you've harnessed social media, Facebook, the website, to really promote the TR Register's motorsport activity. So well done to you, Roger, for doing that.
Thank you.
Pass on to Paul Hogan here. Yeah, big round of applause for Roger. So away from the club championships, and we've had quite a lot of success, Paul, haven't we, in taking TRs back to Le Mans. And we started way back in 2005, of course, with the support race with the TR2, where you had Tony Dron racing to celebrate the anniversary of TR2's racing at Le Mans. And then later on in that decade, you returned to the 24 hours before we then took on Le Mans Classic in 2014 and 2016, initially as a team of 3. And then, of course, with your TR3S most recently in 2016. That was a lifelong ambition fulfilled, was it not?
Yeah, it was indeed. Before we go on to that, I'd just like to ask Roger here, how much did the championship entry fee now for a sprint?
20, to enter an event?
An event, yeah.
Between 80, the cheapest, which would be an MG event at Wiscombe, to 140 or 150 for a sprint at Goodwood or Castle Combe.
All right, I just want to put that in perspective. When I started the Kerbera Sprints back in 78, 77, I think it was, 78, the entry fee was £8.50, and we made a profit. So times have changed. Right, on to Le Mans. Yeah, we first went back there in 2005 with Jan Pearce's car, and the register very kindly stumped up £3,000 in sponsorship. And although the car broke down during the race, it was very, very well done. Tony Dron, I was with Bill Piggott at the time at Goodwood and saw Tony Dron coming out the paddock, and so we doorstepped him and said, Mr. Dron, you know, how would you like to highlight your career by driving for the TR Register? And he looked at us rather quizzically and thought, who are these oafs? And said, well, yes, but I'm a bit of a tart, meaning he wanted some money. So he said, how about £500 and all the beer you can drink? Done deal, he says. So, and that's how it came. And it was Tony also christened this most dangerous man in the TR Register T-shirt I'm wearing. So there's a story behind that. But so 2005 was really good. Jan's car was really good. And as we all know, that's recently sold for a record price of £250,000, near enough. And it was a great weekend. A lot of the people, Tony Jeans, people like that, all helped out, and it was a great event. Following that, we had 2006. I was approached by Paul Gehring, who owns the TRS replica. I met him at Revington's party, which is always a bad sign, and being pissed, he said, "Oh, can you get me an entry?" And of course, yeah, I said, "Yeah, why not? No, anything. King of Black, I can do anything," not knowing how hard it would be. But we got the entry, and we had good fun there. And Tony Dron drove again with Nick Marsh, and that was a great event, and we finished well. And then, and when did it come that? It was, hang on, my notes.
2014 was the Millers team, wasn't it?
2013 was the first race. I got the TRS at the 24-hour support race.
Yes.
With the Le Mans Legends. And scrutineering, because it hasn't got FIA papers, and you have to have FIA papers to compete. And the scrutineers came down, and they were running a bit short of time. And I'm basically crapping myself. Am I going to be excluded having spent all this money? And, pretty car, pass. And that was the scrutineering. Yeah. If only it ever turned out like that again, because the following years were very different. But it was good.
Yes, 2016, there was a moment where Scrutineer didn't like your battery clamp, so myself and Tony Jeans had to go running off into town to find Bricolage, which is a DIY shop in Le Mans city centre. And Tony and I went in there, and Tony's luckily brilliant at speaking French and knew what the French for studded rod was or something, and threaded bar, and we managed to get all the stuff to cobble together a battery clamp. But we did have a pit board made out of a Neela. So that was better than the year before.
Just a correction. It wasn't the battery clamp that was the problem. It was the fire extinguisher bracket.
Oh, that's right.
Which was identical to the Sunbeam Alpine, my fire extinguisher system, straight off the shelf from Demon Twigs, identical to the one in the Sunbeam Alpine. And no, you can't have that. You must have bolted in. But it's exactly the same as that one. No. He's fine. You are out. And this was about 30 minutes before the end of scrutineering. It was really fraught. And then they buggered off and we couldn't find them. So we couldn't get my scrutineering papers till the next day, literally half an hour before the race, which was fraught. We did the three-car event in 2014 with Paul's car again, the TRS, Neil Fender's TR2 and my own TR3S. And that was really good. It's a nice team effort. So we had a car in every plateau. So there was something for the members to see. And that was a great event. But 2016 was the best for me, personally, because not only did we have Claude Dubois, one of the original works drivers from 1959, and drive the car as well, but Chris Ryan, who aided with John Sykes and Barry Siddery Smith, Chris Ryan absolutely drove the wheels off my car. And if you see the video that's on YouTube, even I winced as it went past the Lotus. I expected to see a long strip of green paint down the side of it, because it's going to hit that sort of thing, but no, he didn't. But down the Mulsanne straight, the car was clocked at 135 plus miles an hour, which in a TR is going some. Yeah. It really is. And the fact that it took out a Jaguar, listed Jaguar, on the Mulsanne corner, I thought I was really proud about that. And the bread van Ferrari ended up in the kitty litter, so the first you must finish, as they say. Yes. Yeah, so it was good.
My abiding memory of that morning was Chris coming in for his driver change, and someone shouted, "There's a problem at the back," because there was smoke pouring out the rear wheel arches, absolutely pouring. And I had a look underneath the wheels, and the smoke was coming off the tyres.
I think the technical term for the tyres that they were shagged.
Yeah, and we can't mention that Le Mans that year, of course, without mentioning Barry Siddery Smith, who was a fantastic driver and was a brilliant part of the team. What a lovely guy.
Barry Siddery Smith, for those who don't know, is an MGB driver. And because we've been going to Le Mans since 2005, we had a bit of banter sort of thing, MG versus TR. And we had a £5 note bet that we would beat him. And every year we lost. And so there's pictures of me doing homage to Barry sort of thing with this £5 note. But it was good fun. I mean, Neil Reventon took he bought a standard Atlas van and did it up in works colours. I'd bought, with Bill Pigg, a standard Vanguard estate car, and we painted that up in works Triumph colours with a film unit on it and stuff like that. And Dick Skipworth, the owner of the dinky toy, corgi toy transporter that everyone had, asked me to bugger off because the Vanguard was getting more attention than his £1 million transporter. So it was good fun. It was great. It wasn't cheap racing. I think the last race cost £12,000 all in, because the entry fee is about £5,000 or £6,000. It's £1,000 on the ferry. It's £1,000 for a set of tyres. Basically, anything you want, it's £1,000, including the beer. So it was, but it's a great experience, and it's the icing on the cake for me. I'll never top it. And I don't think I'll ever go back, because once you've done it, I've got the T-shirt, as they say. No need to do it again.
Well, 36 hours of no sleep for me in the media centre, making sure we had all pictures and video for all the magazine. And it was an amazing experience to be a part of it as well. So well done, Paul, for that amazing achievement. On behalf of the TR Register, big hand.
Thank you.
What's this? We've got a very old-looking letter here.
Have you? Has everyone else finished their bit?
Yes. Go on.
Oh, I know. I might have another word afterwards.
I'll take the mic off him. Look. I don't need it.
One thing I did omit, and it concerns quite a number of people in the room. So it's not the stratospheric Le Mans type of motorsport. It's the grassroots, everyday person's motorsport, which is overall more applicable to everyone who's sitting here today. One of the members sitting here today is Julian Furness, and Julian, if you'd like to stand up just for a moment. No one's going to shoot you. And I've got permission to read this out from Julian. I was going to do it without his permission, but as he's here, I think it's proper that he should know. This concerns the events that the Register did in the early and mid-70s in terms of long-distance convoys, or I forget what they're called exactly, but you've still got to have an RSE permit for them, that's for sure. In 1973, in September 73, we did our first Land's End to John O'Groats run with about 25 cars, and it was supposed to be an economy run. We also did a round Britain tour in 1975 or 76 with a lot of cars, and we did a Jubilee run in 1977 for the Queen's Jubilee. And all these runs, long runs, involved a lot of people, a lot of organisation, a lot of sponsorship, and a lot of fun. And I thought, rather than hearing it from the floor, from up here, it would be nice if I could read out this report, which was I asked for from all the drivers at the end of the Land's End to John O'Groats economy run, as a summary of their experiences and the results they got on the run. So if you can bear with me, I'll try and do it justice. So it's Land's End to John O'Groats run in a TR4 FEV 444B. Monday, 3rd of September 1973, we left Land's End at 9 p.m, followed the A30 to Oakhampton, and then bypassed Exeter using the B1325 to Congleton, not to Congleton, to Coppleton. Crediton, Tiverton, Stamford, Peveril. This section lost us time due to ground fog in the valleys. We joined the A38 and proceeded to Taunton. The M5 through and around Bristol also cost us huge amounts of time because we followed heavy goods M5 signs, which diverted us along the southern area of Bristol. The M5 and the M6 were used to advantage, cruising at 80 miles to 85 miles an hour with little traffic and very good visibility until we reached northern end of the M6 just before Shap fell. Then low cloud and fog was encountered, reducing speed to below 40 miles an hour. The low cloud persisted along Shap and eventually cleared after approximately 20 miles. Due to lack of sleep, I pulled in on a lay-by at the beginning of the A74 for 1 hour's sleep. Continuing northwards, the drizzle and rain, which was to stay with us for the remainder of the run, commenced. I was intending to use the A73, but missed the turning, so carried on to the A74 and to the M74, M73, and joined the A80, heading northeast and then due north via the M9 section to Dunblane, when we joined the A9. I was forced to stop once again from fatigue for another hour's interval, and then we just passed Ochterarder. Heavy vehicles, lorries, rain, sleepy crew accounted for an incorrect road selection on leaving Perth. We finished up on the A93 for several miles before retracking our route back into Perth, which was a dreadfully congested place, and thus onto the correct A9. The A9 was followed through Inverness and around the coast to the A836, which looked on the map like a shortcut, but I now have my doubts. Hilly, twisty, uninhabited, but inhabited by suicidal sheep, but back on the A9 through Bonar Bridge and Hamsdale, Wick, and then a mad dash across the hills to arrive at John O'Groats at 5 p.m. Tuesday, the 4th of September 1973. I found the worst section was from Penrith to Wick, contending with holiday makers, caravans coming south and lorries going north, plus the incessant light rain which added to the problems. After refreshing ourselves quickly at John O'Groats, we drove south again. Where else? And turned a homeward journey for a short holiday, for which the navigator was very thankful. Conclusions: total distance 935 miles, total time at 19 hours, total time on the road 17 hours, average speed 55 miles an hour, total fuel 27 gallons, total fuel consumption 34.63 mpg.
Brilliant. There was something very shipping forecast in your delivery there, Darryl. It was very good. That's the one. That's it. I'm not going to sing Sailing By. That's where I draw the line. Well, Big round of applause then, ladies and gentlemen, for all those who make TR Motorsport happen in the TR Register.